Time moved forward, even though a part of me stayed behind. Days passed. Then weeks. The routine stitched itself back together the way it always did: meals, conversations, shared spaces that looked like togetherness from the outside. I played my role well. Too well. If guilt leaves fingerprints, I had learned how to wipe them clean, but memory is not so easily erased. I stopped taking the long way to the market. I told myself it was convenience, nothing more, yet I knew the truth. I was afraid of coincidence. Afraid of what my heart might do before my mind could intervene. Some doors, once noticed, are harder to walk past again. At home, things remained unchanged. No confrontation. No confession. The distance between us stayed quiet, familiar. I wondered if this was how many stories like mine lived on, not exploding, not ending, just settling into silence. Was loyalty measured only by actions, or by the thoughts we chose not to follow? That question haunted me late at night. When the house slept, I revisited that moment in my mind. The gate. The dim light. The feeling of being heard. I questioned myself over and over, searching for clarity. Had I betrayed my partner, or had I merely uncovered a truth I was too afraid to face? I never saw him again. Or maybe I did, and simply chose not to notice. Either way, the absence became its own presence. A reminder that not all turning points are loud. Some whisper, and you only realize their impact long after they've passed. What stayed with me wasn't desire, or even regret. It was awareness. An understanding that fidelity is more fragile than I once believed, not because people are careless, but because they are human. Because they long to be seen. Because silence, when left unattended, grows its own consequences. I didn't leave. I didn't confess. I didn't reach out. I chose restraint, though I wasn't sure if it came from strength or fear. And life continued, as it always does, offering no clear answers, only choices we learn to live with. Sometimes, I catch myself standing at the door before stepping out, pausing longer than necessary. In those moments, I remember how easily one night can tilt the balance of a life without visibly changing a thing. Nothing dramatic happened. No rules were broken in ways the world could see, yet something shifted permanently within me, a quiet knowing that some lines, once approached, never fully disappear, even if you step back. And so the story ends where it began. With a question. Is a betrayal still a betrayal if no one else ever knows, except you? That night began like every other night. No storm. No warning. Just the soft hum of routine wrapping itself around me like a habit I no longer questioned. I stepped out of the house with my keys in my hand, telling myself I'd be back in 10 minutes. Milk. Bread. Nothing more. The kind of errand that doesn't change anything. Inside the house, everything had felt quiet, but not peaceful. The walls knew me too well. The silence between me and the person I lived with had grown familiar, heavy in a way that no argument ever was. We spoke when necessary. We smiled when expected. But somewhere along the way, feeling had been replaced by function. As I walked toward the market, the streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows that stretched and disappeared with every step. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have. I remember thinking how strange it was that the night felt more alive than my own home. I was halfway down the road when I heard my name, not shouted. Not rushed. Just called. I stopped for a moment. I wondered if I had imagined it. But then I heard it again, calm, familiar in an unfamiliar way. I turned slightly and saw him standing near the gate of a neighboring house. An African boy I had seen before. Always quiet. Always polite. We had exchanged nods in passing, nothing more, until now. Are you going out? He asked. It was an ordinary question. The kind that shouldn't matter. Yet something about the way he asked, unhurried, attentive, made it feel heavier than it was. I answered without thinking, telling him I was going to the market. He smiled. Not wide. Not inviting. Just enough to be noticed. Come inside for a minute, he said. I need to ask you something. I hesitated. My body stayed still, but my mind raced ahead. I thought of the clock. Of the house I had just left. Of the invisible line that existed between politeness and something else. Every sensible part of me told me to refuse, to continue walking, to keep this night exactly as it was meant to be, but another part of me, the quieter one, the tired one, felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. I told myself it was harmless. Just a question. Just a minute. The night air felt warmer as I turned slightly toward him. My legs moved slower than before, as if they were deciding on their own. With every step back toward that gate, a strange awareness settled in my chest, something between curiosity and guilt. I hadn't crossed any line yet, but I could see it, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to walk away. I told myself it meant nothing, yet my feet had already changed direction. I followed him only a few steps inside. The gate creaked softly as it closed behind us, and that sound alone made my heart beat faster than it should have. It wasn't fear that I felt, it was awareness. The kind that sharpens every sense, making you notice the smallest things. The dim light near the doorway. The quiet of the street fading away. The sudden feeling that I was no longer just passing through the night. He stood a respectful distance from me. No touch. No rush. Just presence. I won't keep you long, he said, as if he sensed my hesitation. I just needed advice. Advice. Such a harmless word. I nodded, telling myself again that there was nothing wrong with listening. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, asking about something simple: work, life, how people manage loneliness when they live far from where they belong. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. A sincerity that made me listen more closely than I intended to. As he talked, I realized how long it had been since anyone had asked me questions without expecting something in return. I answered honestly, too honestly. My words came out before I could measure them. I spoke about routine, about distance, about how two people can share a roof and still feel like strangers. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened, and that, somehow, felt dangerous. The space between us remained the same, yet it felt smaller. Not because he moved closer, but because I allowed him in, past the polite surface, past the version of myself I usually showed the world. I became aware of my own voice, how soft it had become, how personal. A thought crossed my mind then, sharp and unwelcome. This is how it starts, not with touch, not with desire, but with being understood. I glanced toward the open doorway, the street visible beyond it. Freedom was right there. So was safety. I could leave, apologize, laugh it off as a brief conversation with a neighbor. No one would ever know except me. He thanked me quietly, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable. You're easy to talk to, he said. I don't feel invisible when you listen. The words stayed with me longer than they should have. I felt a tightening in my chest, part guilt, part something else I refused to name. I took a small step back, creating distance that felt both necessary and painful. I told him I had to go. The market would close soon. Responsibilities were waiting. He nodded, understanding without protest. As I stepped back out into the street, the night rushed toward me again, as if trying to reclaim me. The sounds returned. The lights. The ordinary world. But I wasn't the same person who had stopped walking minutes earlier. I hadn't done anything wrong. At least, that's what I told myself. Yet as I continued toward the market, one thought followed me relentlessly: some lines are crossed without ever being seen, and once crossed, they never fully disappear. The errand no longer mattered. The night felt unfinished. The house looked the same when I returned. Same door. Same dim light in the hallway. Same familiar silence waiting for me inside. Yet the moment I stepped in, I felt it, an invisible shift, like the air had learned a secret before I did. I placed the groceries on the counter, careful, deliberate, as if moving too quickly might expose something I was trying not to name. Nothing had happened, and still, my chest felt tight. From the other room, I could hear movement. A chair scraping lightly. The sound of someone existing in the same space as me, yet worlds away. We exchanged a few ordinary words, questions without meaning, answers without depth. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected. But my mind wasn't fully there. It was still standing near the gate. I replayed the conversation again and again, searching for a moment where I could say, this is where it went wrong. But there was no clear point. No dramatic mistake. Just words. Silence. Understanding. That was what unsettled me the most. Later, lying in bed, the ceiling felt closer than usual. Each tick of the clock pressed against my thoughts. I turned slightly, aware of the space between us, the physical gap mirroring an emotional one that had been growing long before tonight. Guilt crept in quietly, not accusing, just present. Was listening. A betrayal. I thought about how easily I had opened up. How natural it had felt. That frightened me more than any reckless impulse could have. It suggested a hunger I had been ignoring, a need that hadn't disappeared just because I pretended it didn't exist. Sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound made me alert. A phone vibration that wasn't there. Footsteps outside that belonged to no one. My own thoughts felt louder than the room. I wondered if guilt always felt like this, subtle, persistent, impossible to shake once it takes hold. In the days that followed, I found myself distracted. Conversations blurred. Familiar routines felt mechanical. And then there was the route to the market. I avoided looking in that direction, afraid of what I might feel if I saw him again, or worse, what I might hope for. He hadn't done anything wrong. That realization sat heavily with me. There was no villain here. No manipulation. Just two people crossing paths at the wrong moment in their lives. Yet knowing that didn't make the weight any lighter. I started to understand something I had never fully accepted before. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it settles in quietly, disguised as connection, growing stronger the more you deny it. I asked myself whether this was just a moment, or a mirror held up to a deeper truth. Whether the real betrayal was toward my partner, or toward myself, for ignoring what I felt for so long. Or nothing had changed on the surface, but inside, I carried a secret that felt heavier with each passing hour. Some betrayals leave no evidence, only a conscience that refuses to stay silent.